We're going to be talking about affirming LGBTQ spaces. Today, that's going to be creating safety, and as you'll see throughout these slides, it's saving lives, really. You can do a lot, even as just one person. All right, so everyone was so gracious enough to introduce themselves, and we did also have the lovely bios in the beginning, but just to introduce us properly, let's let Nikki go first.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Nikki. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the prevention educator at the Sexual Assault Crisis Service in New Britain.
Awesome. Hello, I'm Silas Cavadini. My pronouns are he, him. I am the LGBTQ plus advocate at the Sexual Assault Crisis Service of New Britain. We have Dre.
And my name is Dre Chestnut. I am the volunteer program assistant at the Sexual Assault Crisis Service, and my pronouns are she, they.
Awesome. All right, so before any presentation, we do want to give our statement of anti-racism. And this is to say that we at SACS acknowledge the presence of racism and anti-Blackness in our work and in our communities. We stand with and will advocate for people of color in all our work. We denounce and will actively fight against racism and white supremacy in all its forms. Yeah, scooch over to the side here a bit, just so I can do this.
It's comfortable.
They're lovely, but I also want to do it without blocking anyone or having to turn my back on anything. All right. So this is just a brief little overview of what we're going to be discussing today. I'm going to lead us up pretty much through the statistics here, and then we're going to toss it over to Nikki, who's going to do a really lovely mindfulness practice, and then get into how we can use a lot of the statistics that I go over and turn that into those affirming spaces. Okay, so we've mentioned a few of these things briefly, but at SACS, we offer several services. They are listed here. I'll just go through them again very briefly. We have a 24-hour crisis hotline. This is available in English and Spanish. We offer accompaniments to hospitals, courthouses, and to the police stations. We do short-term crisis counseling. Generally, this is in the form of about 12 sessions. These are free. We offer weekly support groups. We do prevention education, which is, as you see right now, kind of what we're doing here. And we offer counselor advocate training, which is, as I mentioned, what Trey handles. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Okay, this here is our service area. We are this lovely, like, orange reddish color in the top middle there. But as you can see, there is a service similar to what we do throughout all of the state. So no matter where you are, there is a service like ours to assist you. And that's pretty much that. And this is available online and also in these slides. Okay, so before we get into the meat of things, just want to give a little disclaimer that some of what we were talking about is going to be very heavy. We will be mentioning suicide, mental illness, trauma, and sexual assault. This is important to the topics we need to discuss, but of course, at any point, if you are uncomfortable, if you are triggered, please take care of yourself first. You can, take a moment, go outside. Thankfully, this is all being recorded, so you can always catch back up later. No one will ask any questions and no one will shame you or anything. Please take care of yourself first and foremost. Okay, so here we are. One thing that's not quite listed up on here, but I do also want to give another disclaimer for, is that I will be using the term queer throughout this presentation to take the place of LGBTQ+. This is because this is a term that I am comfortable with, I'm familiar with, but I do acknowledge that this may be a term that some people are uncomfortable with due to its past history. If anyone is uncomfortable with this term, please let me know and I will refer back to it as LGBTQ+. We simply use queer because, again, that's something I'm comfortable with, and it is overall just kind of shorter. There's less syllables to kind of say each time. So that's just a note, and Nikki will also be using that term in her section of the presentation. And the other thing I want to mention before we jump in is in a lot of these statistics, we will be discussing queer youth, but everything that I discuss is also applicable to adults. It's simply that a lot of the research and the funding is in queer youth. So a lot of the numbers we get is more applicable to that. But again, all of this is just about being accepting, being kind, and that can apply to anyone at any age. All right, with all my disclaimers out of the way, take a breath. So jumping into this, we're going to really start at kind of the basics because I know that a lot of us have a lot of understanding of LGBTQ identities, but we really want to make sure that we're starting from the basics so everyone gets everything. So we're going to start with, what does it stand for? So we have L, which is typically lesbian, G, gay, B, bisexual, T is typically transgender, Q is queer or questioning, and there are other identities. You'll also oftentimes see IA. I often refers to intersex. A could be asexual, aromantic. And we also have the plus, which is just all other identities. And one thing that I like to say, or actually we like to say, is that there are as many queer identities as there are queer people. No queer person is the same as another. So that's why that plus is really, really important. Some of the topics we will be discussing, I'm going to break each of these down individually, so don't worry about that right now. But sex assigned at birth, gender identity and expression, and sexual orientation, and the fact that all of these things are not mutually exclusive, but they all kind of fall within the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Okay, as I mentioned, these are kind of the ways we're going to break this down. So it covers three things, which is sex assigned at birth, which is how we are assigned, right? That is often based on your physical presentation. Gender, this is who we are, right? Internally and sometimes externally with expression. And sexual orientation, this is who we love. All of these things fall under the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Okay, first one's first. And we have sex assigned at birth. As you can see, we have a few here. It's oftentimes male or female, but there is also intersex. And the sex assigned at birth is basically when you are born, right? The doctor or whoever is presiding, whether it's a midwife, whoever may be there, they see the new baby, they look at your bathing suit area, they see what presentation your external genitalia has, and they will pick one of these. So as I said, most oftentimes it is male or female, but intersex is actually more prevalent than people realize. And that is when a person's sexual and reproductive anatomy doesn't fit. And we put typical because it's, as I said, way more common than people think, definitions of male or female. And one statistic that I like to share is that there are as many intersex individuals as there are people with naturally red hair. So for every person with naturally red hair, it's likely that you have met as many intersex individuals. And it's interesting to note as well that a lot of times intersex people may not realize that they are actually even intersex because it is not always based on external genitalia. There are variations of internal, again, deviations internally, and oftentimes it's not even diagnosed until people are attempting to have children and they're infertile and they go to fertility specialists and discover that maybe their internal organs are not as they thought they were. And as we don't all have, mapping of how our whole body works, it's sometimes like that we discover it. Okay. All right, next we are going to jump into gender. This is who we are, and we are going to spend a good deal of time on this and break down kind of each of these topics. But this is who we are, and this is the two things that make this up are our identity and our expression, right? And these two things, they may align, but they may also differ. Identity is our internal experience. A good way I like to talk about this is if you just kind of close your eyes, and you don't have to do this, but it's just a thing. If you were to close your eyes and just imagine yourself as a being existing, and someone were to ask you, what is your gender? Are you male? Are you female? Are you none of the above? Are you something else, right? That is your internal experience. If you identify as female when you close your eyes, that's your internal experience of that. Now, expression is something completely different. It could align just perfectly with how we view ourselves internally. And again, I will note this has to do with societal sort of expectations of what that means, but we won't get into that today. This is how you demonstrate that gender, right? A good example of this is like oftentimes rock stars, right? They are a lot of times identifying as male, but they will dress in more what we view as like effeminate clothing, but that is how they express their form of masculinity. Like Harry Styles is a great example of this. And we will discuss this more as we go on, but this is often how you act, dress, behave, And also this can vary based on the society in which you exist and which you have grown. Again, that's very, very subjective. Okay. This is a nice little graphic to discuss the gender identity a little bit more. This is, I will also note, an extremely simplified version, just so we can have a little bit of understanding of what we're talking about. So as we can see, we have cisgender over on one side, we have transgender on the other. Cisgender, for those that don't know, is when you are, when your gender identity aligns with the identity, the sex that you were assigned with at birth, right? So if you were born, doctor looked at bathing suit, said, this baby is male, and you internally identify as male, then you are a cisgender individual. Cis just simply means same. It comes from Latin. I'm going to mention this couple of words a couple of times. You may guess I was an English major. So that just means same. It just means you align with what you were assigned. Transgender, the trans portion just means like across or other side, right? So when we're discussing these two things, this does kind of stick with the gender binary, which is why this isn't the perfect example, but that's okay. Trans just means other. So if in that same example, you were assigned male at birth, but internally you're like, no, I identify as female, or sometimes anything other than male, then you would be considered transgender. Genderqueer is just one we put here. We could also put gender fluid. We could also circle this whole thing and say pangender. We can put another one next to non-binary and say agender. There's so many we could put in here, but I just want to use a few examples. And genderqueer or gender fluid might be somebody that varies on how they identify, right? They may one day feel more feminine, one day more masculine. They may not know entirely, but they know it's not quite what they were assigned. And one we wanted to put down here is non-binary. And it's important to note that some non-binary individuals do consider themselves transgender, others do not. Again, it's all up to the individual person. But as they do not always adhere to the binary, I wanted to acknowledge that and put them off to the side. One of my favorite terminologies from a friend of mine who considers themselves non-binary is they said they are a gender anarchist, and I adore that terminology. So before I move on, because I know I've put a lot of information thus far, any questions on this? Because I know this can be a little bit confusing. Okay, awesome. Oh, yes, please.
So gender queer, I think I'm saying it right. It varies on how we identify. What does that mean? It depends on how they identify. Like, how do they, or the society?
Okay, so if I'm hearing the question right, you're wondering what that terminology means and if it's based on like how they identify,
Yes.
right? So yes, it can be. So an interesting thing is that the word queer, a lot of times it can be used to do all forms of the LGBTQ plus spectrum, right? And a lot of times it can be used in place of when you don't quite know, right? So someone might be exploring their identity and not yet be sure where that lies, and they could call themselves queer, or they might be in the place of gender fluid or any of those things. And these terms are all self-identified, right? So it's all up to the comfort of the individual. So again, they may call themselves genderqueer. We put it here because, and in this zone, because it's definitely not cisgender, right? So it can be anywhere kind of in that. And the gender identity, just like sexual orientation, is a spectrum, and it can vary, and it varies significantly from person to person. Does that answer the question? Okay, great, thank you.
No, but just to letting you know, please, if you have any questions, drop it on the chat. I'm monitoring it and I will tell our amazing presenters. So just letting you know.
Okay, great. There we go. All right. So we have a couple examples here because we've just discussed a lot about gender assigned at birth. Sex assigned at birth and gender identity and gender expression. So we're going to do 3 examples that you may be familiar with. We have the lovely Laverne Cox, She is an actress, most known from Orange is the New Black. She is also an activist and documentarian. She was originally assigned male at birth, but identifies as female, and as you can tell from her lovely outfits, expresses that in a very feminine way. Her pronouns are she, her. And a couple interesting notes about her is that she was the first transgender woman to be nominated for an Emmy for primetime television, and is one of the first transgender individuals, maybe even the first, to be a main character on a scripted television show. There we go. Okay, next we have Elliot Page. So Elliot is a Canadian actor, best known for the Juno, which was a 2007 movie, as well as the Netflix original Umbrella Academy. He was originally assigned female at birth, identifies as male, chooses a very masculine gender expression, uses he, him pronouns. And something I always like to talk about when we discuss Elliot is in the show Umbrella Academy, which if you have not yet seen it, it's a favorite of mine. When he originally started filming the show, it was before his transition, and the character was also in that pre-transition state. But the showrunners and the writers and everything like that incorporated his transition into the show. And they did a really, really wonderful example of coming out, where each family member kind of interpreted it a different way, asked their questions, but ultimately accepted him. And it was just a really wonderful thing. And Elliot did also help in writing that. And one thing that's super heartwarming is after he comes out, he's then invited to the family like bachelor party, which is just a really heartwarming moment. And I thought it was a really good example of how that could look. Okay, and last we have Vico Ortiz, who is an actor, drag king, and activist. They are best known for their role as Jim in the HBO series Our Flag Means Death, which is another fantastic show. It has 2 seasons. It's a very queer show. Vico was assigned female at birth, identifies as non-binary. They express this very androgynously, and that can vary significantly from day to day. And they use the pronouns they, them. I also would like to talk about this show because, as I mentioned, it's a fantastic queer show that has a lot of representation, including with Jim, who originally expresses themselves as a very masculine way. And when the characters discover that they are originally, assigned female at birth, there are some questions, and it is a comedy, I will say that. And they ask a lot of silly questions, but ultimately they decide, no, Jim is just Jim. And then they're happy with that, and Jim remains Jim. And I think that's a really lovely way of going about that. Okay. Before we jump into pronouns here, did that all make sense? Anything there? Okay, awesome. So I was mentioning pronouns, and we've talked about it a little bit today. You see here, there's a little graphic. We're not going to go deep into this, but some of what you see here are what are called neo-pronouns. They are still an uncommon thing, but just as you may experience them, that's just a term. Generally speaking, you will still see he, him, she, her, they, them. So pronouns are ways we identify, and respecting someone's pronouns affirms that we acknowledge them as an individual, right? What do you do if you mess up someone's pronouns? This is particularly prevalent, obviously, if you know someone pre-transition, you're used to referring to them in a certain way. It may be a difficult transition, and mistakes do happen to everybody, even the most best intentioned individual. So what do you do if that happens? Very simple. You just correct yourself and move on. It can be just as simple as going, oh, Nikki, she was just talking to me the other day. That's all you have to do, right? Don't draw more attention to that scenario. And this is for several reasons. One, they may be in a space where you don't know who they are out to. You don't know what the situation is. It could be unsafe that you have now kind of called attention to the fact that they are genderqueer or non-binary, trans, etc. It also shows that it could signal that you're not trying that hard if you're kind of like overly amplifying, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. You don't need to do that. Just kind of move on. And one way to avoid this in the future is to just practice, right? Practice using this person's pronouns and their names, even if they are not present. I would actually say, especially if they're not present. because that's how you are going to internalize that. That's also how you are going to show that you respect that person and their identity to other people, and that you are going to show that you are a safe person, right? This could be especially important if you are dealing with clients, when you are talking about that client to other, colleagues or whatever the case may be, use their name and their pronouns. Okay, we have another lovely graph here as we jump into sexual orientation. So we've already discussed what we are assigned, who we are, and now we're going to talk a little bit about who we love. So this is really just, who we are attracted to, who we love. So we see all the way over to the left, we have asexual, which is not interested in any genders, all the way over to pansexual, which is all gender identities. And this graph here, by the way, you could replace every single one of the word sexuals here with romantic, and they kind of signal the same thing. The difference between that, which we're not going to get into much, is sexual is a sexual attraction, romantic is romantic attraction. Those two things can align, but they can also be different. One thing I want to point out here is so we have same gender, which is typically gay and lesbian. We have hetero, which is opposite gender. That's all under one gender. Bisexual is more than one gender, right? So a lot of times people will assume that bisexual means male and female, which is actually not true. Bisexual just means the one that you align with rather, and another one, right? So it also could be the opposite of you and another one. So it just means more than one. And pansexual, again, is just all of the above. Was there any questions about that one?
I'm sorry, I
No,
actually
please.
have a question. So if you're like, let's say if you're, you liked someone that wasn't male,
Mhm.
but you liked female, and then you like someone that wasn't male.
Mhm.
So that means they're bisexual, like not male, but someone else.
Yeah, that could be. And again, a lot of these terms are really self-identified.
Yes.
So someone in that instance might feel more comfortable with the term lesbian, right? But they also might be bisexual. So again, a lot of these are self-assigned terms, but we're looking at it from if these are definitions, right? Yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm asking.
No, that's a wonderful question. That's why I brought it up, because a lot of times, a lot of our society is based on this sort of binary thinking, right? It's very male, female, black and white. And we really shouldn't be thinking that way for a lot of this stuff. And bisexual doesn't just mean male, female. Okay. Yeah. All right. So this is just a really fun graphic here. This is our gender unicorn, which I adore. And you actually, if you go to that little site that's down there, you can do one for yourself where they don't have the dots filled in yet. It's fun. We like to do them sometimes. And this is just going to show you that all these things we've talked about today are all different, and they can really vary. So our lovely unicorn here, they were assigned male at birth. However, their gender identity is all the way over to female and other, and they don't identify at all with that male sort of identity. But their expression, as you can see here, is actually somewhere more androgynous. They are physically attracted to, pretty much everybody, about 66% of the way there, about, 2/3. However, not emotionally attracted to anybody, right? Or very little. So that just kind of shows how all of these things are so very different. They may all align perfectly, right? That you might be assigned female at birth, you might identify female, you might express that hyperfeminine, you might be as the societal norm of the only interested in men and emotionally attracted to men, and that's great, just as all these other identities are great. Okay, I know I've asked a few times, but any questions at all about the stuff we have discussed? Any questions in chat? Awesome. I'll take that as a sign that I'm explaining it well. Thank you. Okay, so now that we have all of that kind of basis done, we're going to start talking a little bit more about how this comes into being accepting and affirming individuals. So what do you need to know in your day-to-day life, right? Because again, this is a lot of information. It does apply to all the humans around you, but it may not apply to your day-to-day life. It's very easy. All you have to do is know someone's name and their pronouns, right? It's the same thing you do to any other person. Just know someone's name and their pronouns and respect it. It's very, very easy. And you surely don't need to know someone's sexual orientation, but important to not assume that you do, right? Just because someone presents hyper feminine, don't assume that they're interested in men. And that's all you have to do. So just don't make any assumptions, and whatever someone identifies as, whatever they say their pronouns are, whatever their name is, that's it. They know themselves better than anyone else. And this does include children, right? They know themselves. And again, that may change through time, just as it does for a lot of individuals. But just accepting them as they are, who they say they are, is the best thing you can do at any point. All right. So tolerance and acceptance. So these are two very, very different things. You can tell by the mood here, right? So tolerance is the capacity to endure something, whereas acceptance is to regard something as sort of normal, inevitable. An example I like to use here is the DMV. Okay, so we all, at least most of us, if we have cars, we tolerate the DMV. Nobody loves the DMV, right? I just had to re-register my car. I did not want to do that, but I did it because I'm an adult and I have a car and I want to use it. So we tolerate it. But now imagine being a child and your parent talks about you the way they talk about the DMV, right? They may not outrightly be aggressive, but they don't love the DMV. Right? And imagine you're a little kid, the person you love the most in the world talks about you the way they talk about that. That's tolerance, right? Versus acceptance. Acceptance is a whole other thing. Acceptance is seeing a person for who they are, who they say they are, and loving them, right? So that's just a big example that I like to use here. Any questions about that? I mean, I feel like it's pretty explanatory, but okay, great. Inclusive language. So we started talking a little bit about this again with like pronouns and all of that, but some things you can do just sort of in your everyday life to signal that you are a safe or understanding person that acknowledges these things. And you don't have to use all of these things. These are just some really great examples. For example, instead of using husband or wife, you can use spouse, right? Boyfriend or girlfriend, partner. You can use, instead of boys and girls, kids. So these are some wonderful examples of what you can do just casually in your everyday life to be more inclusive. And this is really important to do. I like to say, especially if you are a cis het person, because a lot of these terms, especially partner, sibling, have been signaled as exclusively used by the queer community. And it can lead to discrimination when someone says, oh, my partner, right? Because then you might be flagging, I'm queer. So the more cis het individuals that use this terminology, not only are you showing youth that this is an acceptable, normal way to exist, and you acknowledge that, but also you are making it safer for all the queer people in your lives. Okay, so we're going to start looking at some of those statistics. I know I have already been talking a lot about why this matters, but we're going to see some numbers here soon. So for queer people, especially the LGBTQ youth, or those who have the youth who have LGBTQ people in their family, who hear these non-inclusive terms, may think of themselves as other, less than, or secondary, right? Which is why using those partner, sibling, child terms are just a way to show that like everyone is included here. The Trevor Project, which we are going to be looking at a lot of numbers from, is one of those organizations that surveys queer youth to figure out like a lot of the failings in their lives and where society is failing them. And they look at a lot of the mental health concerns and stuff like that. So we're going to see that the Trevor Project shows having affirming spaces and people in their lives significantly, I mean significantly, reduces a queer youth's rate of attempted suicide. All right. So acceptance saves lives. This is what I talked about at the beginning, and this is true. 41% of queer youth seriously consider attempting suicide in the past year. So that is, if there were 10 LGBTQ plus students standing in front of us right now, 4 of them would have thought about attempting suicide this year. Fewer than 40%, I think it's something like 38 of LGBTQ youth found their home to be affirming. As I said before, this doesn't necessarily mean it's tolerant, but imagine that those parents were talking about them like the DMV or worse. 60% of LGBTQ young people report that they have felt discriminated against in the past year due to their sexual orientation or identity. This is just in their life, school, home, wherever it may be. Okay. LGBTQ plus youth who have access to home, schools, community events, and online spaces that are affirming, that are safe, where they can be themselves, report significantly lower rates of attempted suicide compared to those who do not. And again, we're going to see some numbers as well. And affirming gender identity amongst transgender and non-binary youth is also consistently associated with lower rates of suicide. We have a
Oh, I didn't annotate it.
Say, you might want to define that.
To annotate it.
There you go. There we go. We're back.
Back to normal.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, you're fine. It's a pop-up. Okay, gave me a second to breathe. I talk fast. Okay, so as I mentioned, some of those numbers, here's some of those big ones. So having at least one accepting adult in the life of an LGBTQ youth reduces their rate of suicide by 40%. This is massive, specifically talking to who we're talking to today. This does not even necessarily mean like a parent or a friend. This is just having a single adult who is accepting of them, right? That is where social workers, where school, like advisors, things like that, it's so, so important. Even if you see this child every once in a while, you could be the difference in their life. Trans and non-binary people who live in a home where everyone respects their pronouns have that suicide rate drop from 56% down to 12%, which is, as noted here, lower than the national average. So this is just how huge this is, right? Having an accepting home for a child to feel safe and secure, or having one single adult in their life that they can look to and say, okay, not all adults hate me, right? That's massive. Okay, this is also from the Trevor Project. I'm mentioning a lot of this stuff because it's phenomenal work that they do. So here we have the top things that LGBTQ youth reported that they want people in their lives to know more about. So 82% of youth, and I will note that youth is, I believe they do up to 24 is the age I believe they do. They just want support and acceptance. So 82% are telling us that the people in their lives are not supportive or acceptive of them. They would also like them to obviously know more about gender identity, sexual orientation, pronouns, but also another huge number, 68% want safe spaces, which means that those numbers that want that, that's how much is lacking, right? 68% do not have a safe space. 82% are not supported and accepted. Just gonna leave it at that. I don't think I could say anything else. Yeah, there's nothing else I could say. The numbers speak for themselves there. Okay. So we just went through a lot. We are going to look at 3 sort of case studies. I'm not going to go crazy in depth. We're not going to look at diagnoses or anything like that. We're just going to discuss them, and I'm going to mention why I think these ones are important to discuss. So just going through this, a young adult non-binary client reported self-harm and suicidal ideation due to a sexual assault and family rejection for their gender identity. Client had been through 3 individual therapists, but reported they stopped discussing their gender identity when none of them understood. They eventually joined an intensive outpatient for their depression. The client discussed openly that they were regularly triggered by misgendering and dead naming at the outpatient, both by staff and participants. This resulted in self-report that their mental health was declining, at which point the intensive outpatient program staff decided to send the client inpatient against their will. While inpatient, the staff refused to use the client's chosen name. When the client asked staff to use they, them pronouns, the staff member replied, "We are really busy here and don't have time for that." The client's self-harm increased, so they were kept longer due to declining mental health. Now, I know why I brought this here to talk about. Does anyone here have anything that they're noticing that they want to talk about? And it's okay if you don't. Okay. So I brought this here because I wanted to discuss how important it is to someone that they are respected, right? That they are gendered correctly, that they are using their name appropriately. And a lot of times we will see this in the health fields that queer individuals will not be respected by this because they will use excuses of, oh, well, that's not what your paperwork says, right? And that can significantly lead to decrease in someone's mental health. If they are already depressed, they're seeking treatment, and now the people that they're seeking help from don't even acknowledge them as people, as who they really are. You can imagine how detrimental that is to someone's well-being. How do you trust someone to assist you in getting better when they don't even see you and they don't even respect you, right? So when working with individuals, again, of any age, it's just so important to acknowledge who they are. A lot of us like to think that we are doing the best we can, and it's really just as simple as that, right? You can help someone so much by just seeing them, accepting them, and then working with them on their other issues, if that's what you're there to do. Any questions on that one? All right. So number 2, we have a trans male combat veteran engaged in services to discuss several sexual assaults they endured while they were in the service. The client reports that they were not able to transition until they left the military because it would have resulted in a dishonorable discharge, which is, I will note here, something that we do see a lot with military transgender individuals, because if they do get that dishonorable discharge, they've also now lost all of that healthcare, all of the things that they would have been working towards in the military, which is, as we all know, our current healthcare system is not great. So that could be a huge detriment. The client reports that this led to a deep feeling of dysphoria as they were forced to be housed with the other women and treated as a woman for the entirety of their service. This left them also vulnerable to further sexual assaults. We didn't go deep into a lot of this, but that is also a very common thing that we will see, especially with the transgender population. They are far more vulnerable to sexual assault. After the client was released from military service due to an injury sustained during combat, he was sent home and began the process of transitioning. While gender affirming care is covered under some insurance policies, the VA, which is federally funded, does not cover surgical gender affirming care. So they were not able to get surgical intervention to assist with their transition. The client was also unable to receive services on base following a name change, just because they wanted their name to align with who they were, because their military ID and driver's license had 2 different names. So now, while they completed their service in order to get these health benefits, they were now no longer able to do that on base because their IDs did not match any longer. The client reported that he felt depressed, anxious, and lonely due to his support system in the military service no longer contacting him after the transition. I know I've stopped a couple of times to explain some things, and the big reason I wanted to discuss this one as well is just to note that queer individuals have very, very different, or can have very, very different support networks, support systems. A lot of times, these individuals are exiled from their families. They don't have the same friends. And as we see here with this client, they are now completely isolated from their new family, which was their military support system, because they were no longer contacted by them. So be aware that in interacting with queer individuals, their support network can look exceedingly different than someone who is, not queer. Of course, this does vary from person to person, but just be aware. Any questions on this one? Okay. All right, and this is our last one of the case studies, and I think the last of my things to talk about. So I'm going to end on a slightly happier note. I will say that. So this is a trans youth who began seeing a counselor after experiencing suicidal ideation and having undergone a recent inpatient stay. They reported severe depression due to lack of acceptance by their family and bullying at school because of their gender identity. Client continued seeing this new counselor once a week. While nothing else immediately improved in their day-to-day life, their suicidal ideation dropped immensely. Now, several years on, the client shows no significant suicide risk. I'll stop here just to talk about this for a moment. So remember I mentioned how having one accepting adult in your life can lower that rate by 40%? This is it in action. This is someone who was seeing a colleague of mine, and I've talked to them about this. And it's honestly, it's wild to see, because this individual was bullied at school, did not have accepting family, and was in and out of inpatient frequently at a very young age, all due to their gender identity. And they started seeing a counselor, and once a week, they saw this person who was accepting, who was caring, who wanted to listen, and who wanted to be there for them. And while nothing else in their life changed, right? Their parents did not immediately get better. School did not magically also get better. They did not magically get 30,000 friends, right? They saw this one person once a week, and they stopped having suicidal ideation. And now they're doing a lot better. And I will note that this counselor, over time, over the course of years, was able to begin working with the client's family to also increase the acceptance at home. And they recently were able to start receiving gender affirming care, which is fantastic. And another little note here, because this is a big talking point that we get a lot in the media, gender affirming care looks very, very different for a transgender youth, right? So oftentimes, this does not have anything to do with hormones or surgeries or anything like that. Usually, it's something as simple as getting a haircut, right? If there's a trans boy who's, say, 12, all they're going to do is get a haircut and maybe some clothing that aligns with their gender identity. And that is massive, but that is also gender affirming care. So when these conversations are happening about gender affirming care, that's also what they're talking about, especially when you're talking about this sort of youth, right? Any questions on that? Yes.
I just wanted to comment thank you for explaining that gender affirming care, because I was thinking more as like a healthcare provider, but in fact, it's the parent being accepting and
Yes.
gender affirming, so, or
Absolutely.
grandparents or whoever, so that's important.
Yes, absolutely. And that, like that acceptance and that gender affirming care does start at home. And sometimes that gender affirming care is also just using the right pronouns, right? We think of it, like you said, medically. We think of it as puberty blockers or HRT or surgeries. And while that is definitely a part of it, that's more aligned towards adults. Usually gender affirming care for children is just respecting them and getting them a haircut or some new toys, All right. I believe it's up to Nikki. So before I pass it off, any questions at all about all the stuff I talked about? Because I know there was a lot. Great. I will take that as I explained it well, and I will let my voice rest and pass it to Nikki.
Thank you so much, Silas. I'm always amazed. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna offer a 2 or 3 minute break, whether that be you need to take a bio break or get some water or anything that you need. Even those online, if you need to turn your camera off for a moment and take care of yourself. And then when we get back, we're going to explore with a meditation. That kind of brings us into the embodiment of being in the closet and what that feels like to live in secrecy. So we're also going to, for the remainder of our time together, is be a little bit more collaborative on how we can create more affirming and trauma-sensitive spaces. So take a couple minutes.
I'm going back on things.
Yeah.
I'll say 32.
All right, we'll do that. 10:32.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Thank you.
I know, like, when you talk about the one that they will.
Yeah.
And I'll mention it later.
We are laughing at it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because with a workshop years ago in the building, I was certified in school cleaning. And the biggest thing I got through those weeks of training was that the number one factor in the child's ability to tap into their resilience
Yes.
is the received connection to one parent adult.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
So when you said that, we're like, so, and Regina would always add, so you may not even realize, like, you are that person.
not,
Like, the
right.
student is so connected.
Yeah.
Because-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was awesome. I was thinking the same
Yeah.
thing.
And, you know, oftentimes we see that in the place of like, you know, that one like English or history teacher who's really cool and it's the kids sitting in their classroom during lunch or whatever. But that is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It is. Oh,
It's a great job.
thank you so much. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
I always get so jittery before presentations, but
Cool.
Yeah.
yeah, you know, it's like once you get started, it kind of flows. Yeah.
Plus, when you get the feel of room too, you know?
Right. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Tell people what about tomorrow.
Oh, no.
But it looks like they're gonna like-
Here's the office in here.
I should be able to.
Where's your office?
What do you want to do?
I mean, we're on the.
Hold on, we got my piece.
Oh, great.
I could say it afterwards too. Just like, I want to hear it. Between us and like, I don't know. I'll go with anybody.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Session cannot be extended.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, maybe I have to wait till it times out. Maybe. Does anyone use the parking where you have to do it through the app?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have to wait till it's fully done before you can re-up it?
Not fully done, so you have to do a few minutes before,
Okay.
just like a few minutes before, and then just to renew it.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm a little too close because it's like 5 minutes away.
Oh,
Okay. Wait. I take it again.
I'm sure Dre knows. She
Yeah.
did that last year. She worked it.
Yeah, it is. It's at the library.
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
yeah, I parked there. I remember we were having a parking issue last week.
Mm-hmm.
So that day I did this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I know, like, if you do it, the security guard told me that if you do it a little closer to, your time,
Yeah,
then you just have to renew it for 2 hours.
that makes sense. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the next day I Ubered.
Yeah. I would have done the street, but they don't open the streets until.
Yeah, to pay just.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, to pay.
Yeah. When they close it.
It was so. They should have us be priorities.
Then she goes like a-
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like turning it up kind of.
Every time I look, they're sold out.
No, Marshall.
That's the best one.
Like the little,
Unconventional brand, so they're not even.
They had all the sizes. That one's really good. I went yesterday, they had all the sizes, the colors.
The one at like Farming's Corner?
Yeah.
Okay.
you know what, because they normally like replace all their shit on Thursdays, and it's like, that's probably why they don't like that. Yeah. They have so many different shoe options too. I was like, okay, I can only get one pair. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was important to know what.
But those chairs are really annoying sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we were, yeah, it's really entertaining and our teacher, the last year.
Yeah, I like that too, yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't, yeah.
Yeah. So she made it. Oh, that's the goodness. I was so foolish. So foolish. I always think of
Yeah.
But yeah, I like in the people.
That's really great. So she's fine. Like I can just experience that.
Yeah.
As long as you don't mind doing that too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, now I, right, so I'm gonna like try to help them figure out.
Just like culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You would dispose it.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there's like any other.
In the summer, I think, when I went, no, last semester, when I went to Bartaco.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
work center, I worked there.
See if
And there was summer. Yeah, I went with my friend. So the.
Yeah.
you know, we on site.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now. Okay, yeah, I think that, what is project, like, you have to like.
Oh, behind you.
Yeah. Oh.
They haven't even decided.
There was my group.
I kept like suggesting ideas and it's just. And they kept like shutting down my ideas and like just do.
Right.
Like just like that. And it doesn't, it's so small. I'm like, also looking for some books that we could donate to schools. People that's the foundation, mom's doing great reviews. Okay. Filters.
Oh, sweet. Like, oh my God, I love Trader Joe's and their snacks. So that's ever.
I love Trader Joe's.
Oh my God, and they have this. Yeah. So good. Like, I'm sure they have a picture of here. Like, they're so good. Yeah, I think we had something they were like, she like airman. On it. And she's like, micromanager. We were all like, tell us what to do. We'll take it. So, like, yeah.
Yeah.
You did like a free log service for.
Yeah.
We didn't do it right now. Yeah. So, it was like, it's a small scale, so like, yeah.
Oh, you just.
It's like that later, so.
Like cameras.
Yeah.
Which would have been.
Yes.
Gifted it, like.
That happened.
Oh.
Yeah. Like that's been it for class. How many people are in that area?
It was for the.
They said something, they're like, there's no threat or attack or something. People around the leash, obviously not. You know, I know. That's what it's so.
If you. Gosh.
Yeah.
So you.
Yeah, I hear a lot of beautiful conversations going on.
Yeah, today.
Is everyone ready to?
Yeah. Right? But like. Yeah. Space.
That's what was that is
No, no.
That's something.
So, welcome back, everyone. We're gonna get started with our mindfulness practice. As you know, Regina said in my bio, I'm a mindfulness and trauma-informed mindfulness and yoga facilitator. And I just think having a mindfulness practice, having some training around mindfulness, especially in the work that you all do, is very important to be able to check on our own internal responses so that we can show up in the best way possible, not only for ourselves, but for other people. And we've done a lot of the scholarly, mental stuff stimulation, but what we're gonna do now is just embody that information and be collaborative. And, I'm more of a let's go back and forth type of person. So after we do our meditation, we'll get into that. So I just want to invite you to come into a comfortable seat. You can sit back into your chair. You can sit up. You can even put your head down if that feels good to you. And then whenever you are ready, I invite you to maybe close your eyes. Know that you can always keep your eyes open. But maybe you want to create like a soft gaze out through the tip of your nose and down. And just check in with how you're feeling in this moment. Not only physically, but check in with your emotional energy. Maybe something has shifted so far since the first time you joined the Zoom or came into this classroom. And then just take a body scan, noticing from the top of your head, your forehead, eyebrows, cheeks and jaw. Notice your shoulders. Notice your heart space. Take a moment to become aware of your belly. And notice the rise and fall of your belly as you inhale and exhale. And just notice without judgment. Notice the bottom half of your body, the chair supporting you. And then your feet being supported by the ground. And then also maybe visualize the earth supporting the ground that's beneath your feet. the many layers. And then as you're ready, I invite you to start to imagine yourself in a room. Maybe this is a safe space for you. And the walls seem to kind of close in on you, just enough. And this room represents the closet, a place where your true self remains hidden from others. Take a moment to feel the weight of secrecy, the burden of concealing a fundamental part of who you are. And then when you are ready, start to bring in the three most important people in your life. Maybe take a moment to bring in the three most important events that you've experienced in your life. And then when you're ready, your favorite three hobbies. And if you have any pets, what are their names? Now consider the three most important people in your life. And reflect on how it would feel if you were unable to share your true self with them, or if you were unable to share them to other people. Think about if you had to keep a crucial aspect of your life, this very crucial aspect of your life hidden. And allow yourself to feel this isolation and longing for acceptance. Next, recall the three significant events that you've experienced. And imagine how these events would be altered if you had to navigate them while concealing a part of your identity. Feel the impact of silence and the weight of unspoken truths. As you continue to sit in this imaginary closet, bring to mind your three favorite hobbies or activities that bring you joy. Now envision how different these experiences would be if you had to engage in them while hiding a crucial part of who you are. Again, take a moment to sense the internal conflict and the toll it may take on your well-being. Now gently bring your awareness back to your own space. and consider how it felt to be in the closet of silence. And reflect on the parallels between this experience and the challenges faced by queer youth or queer individuals who feel compelled due to society to hide their true selves. As you slowly start to blink your eyes open, maybe there's a little bit of movement that comes into your body, like rolling the head from side to side, rolling the shoulders, and carry with you the empathy and understanding cultivated through this meditation. Remember that creating a safe and accepting environment for everyone to express their true selves is essential to fostering genuine connections and a more compassionate world. And then if it feels okay, sometimes if you got really into the meditation, maybe take a moment to check out your space. This is called reorienting. So count the tiles on the ceiling, look at the gray color of the floor, or maybe look at a friend that makes you feel supported. And before we move on, I just want to ask a little bit of how that felt, any reflections. You can put it in the chat or here too. Anything that came up. It doesn't have to be like perfect. Maybe the closet got a little bit scary or just anything that came up. So.
To be honest, I had a difficult time with connecting to the concept of not being authentically me. So I'm thinking about, my wedding day and the day I gave birth to my daughter, and I just couldn't put myself in a place where, I'm experiencing those two things, those amazing moments, and couldn't be me.
But yes, that's the purpose of the meditation, is knowing that like a lot of us hold privileges where we can be ourselves and society accepts us. And we don't never put ourselves, empathetically in other people's shoes I won't say never, but a lot of the times it's hard for us to put ourselves in other people's shoes to be able to understand what people are really going through. And I think, the purpose of this meditation was to be able to embody that, because sometimes we're in our own little, groove of life, and then something comes up and we forget how to be empathetic, or we're too busy for that right now. And to do practices like this can help ground you to be able to come back to like empathy and compassion.
One of our online participants said, Marisa said, excellent, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, for me, when you asked us to think of like those three important or core people, I immediately thought of my mom and my sisters, and then kind of thinking like, what if you didn't have those people or going through important experiences without those people? And it kind of just made my heart hurt also for like queer youth who maybe they do have those people, but also maybe those people aren't accepting or affirming of who they are, and how that can be as like a young child without important people.
That's a lot for a child to hold. That's to have people that accept them, affirm them, love them, believe them.
Maritza has her hand up.
She should be able to just unmute.
Yeah, you will be able to unmute and talk.
Oh.
I just want to share, yeah, that was really excellent. And the first thing that I actually thought of when we had to do that exercise, if anybody reads books by Colleen Hoover, she wrote a book called Confess, and she asked for people to write their real confessions, and I'm going to put that in air quotes, confessions, but they just shared some of their deepest, I guess I'll call it secrets that they weren't able to tell others. And, you know, just reading that book broke my heart. And that didn't even really have anything to do with identity. So it just, you know, that was just barely a sliver of, in comparison to what, you know, just empathizing with people who have to not be able to share who they actually are. I mean, so that was a great activity. I just want to say thank you.
Yeah. During the meditation, I think the first person I thought about when we talked about important people in our lives, I thought about my daughter. She's 4 now, she'll be 5 at the end of this month. And I'm just thinking like she's going to school and starting her journey, how I can teach her to be more empathetic to students in the class, kids that might identify, you know, how she can be more empathetic to those students. And like we said, creating that safe space for them, being that person that could be a support for someone else, and how I can, if need be, potentially be that support for my daughter, you know, and just bringing the awareness to her. So,
Thank you for sharing that. A lot of this work starts at home. Definitely. It's a practice, it's a life skill. So yes. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so we're gonna get into affirming spaces. So I just wanted to ask real quick, like, what does it mean to affirm? What does affirm mean? At least to you.
I could be wrong, but validate?
Yeah, validate, yes, to state what is true. So a lot of times, you know, I also work in the wellness spaces, so a lot of times what happens, you don't usually see people who look like me in wellness spaces, so I get a lot of, oh, well, I don't see color, or I don't see that. So, you know, affirming someone's identity is really important to their well-being. And when it comes to queer youth, affirming spaces refers to creating environments and communities and organizations that actively, intentionally foster a sense of acceptance, support, and inclusion for individuals who identify as queer and other non-heteronormative or non-cisnormative identities. These spaces aim to create a positive and validating atmosphere where people can be their authentic selves without fear of discrimination. So maybe just think about this. If you're online, you might want to write some of this down, or if you want to share one thing, how you would create an affirming space for someone. Were you raising your hand?
I will look at my water, but I was also about to drink.
Okay.
Before entering this program, I worked in Windsor Public Schools as a social emotional learning specialist. And one of the ways that I made sure that my spaces were affirming is that I made sure that I had a available in my space that shows that that's something that I'm a safe space to talk about that. And also try really hard to have literature and language on the walls of my room that talk about how we are affirming spaces, trending on all individuals. Literally written on the wall.
Thank you for sharing. We're not the only experts in the room. All of y'all are too, so, you good. Next one. So basically, a lot what you said, inclusivity, making sure that, everyone is included, and people see that. Education, what we're doing right now is constantly, things are changing, and to constantly be able to learn and educate yourself on different things that's going on in the world, especially in the queer community, is really important so that, you can help educate your staff, bring people in, do what you can, because we can't stay stuck in what we know, because things are changing. My youngest is 16 years old, and I'll be learning all types of stuff. So if you have children around you or youth around you, they know, and listen to them, because this is their world. So we just live in it, really. Visibility, exactly like what you said around putting up, flags and things in your offices, or, I even think about this as representation, like how many, queer individuals do work with you, and advocating for that. Non-discrimination, allies, being an ally is really important. Allyship is super helpful for queer youth. And what does that look like? I know that there was just a flag.
Oh, was that an Enfield event too?
Enfield.
At Enfield's for the P flag.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we go to rallies,
Yeah.
do supportive things like that. Sure.
Like being involved in the community and creating a supportive atmosphere. I just want to say that we like to use like the term safe, but when it comes to like being trauma informed or using trauma sensitivity lens, you can't really guarantee a safe space for anyone. I could walk into a space and have on a shirt and trigger somebody, or you can't guarantee that, but you can guarantee support. So how that looks is maybe you being that go-to person for somebody to come and talk to you, for a child to come and talk to you, even your coworkers. Like, we're talking about youth, but coworkers or adults in our lives are dealing with, coming to terms with their identity too, because it's been so stigmatized to talk about being queer in spaces. And then just being an advocate. If you hear two teenagers saying some rhetoric that's not cool, stop them, educate them, even in the lunchroom. And then, like I said before, that starts at home. I talk about this too when I talk about anti-racism work. It starts at home. It starts at like, mom, we're not talking about that, or this is not right. And then trauma sensitivity. So does anybody know what trauma informed is, and trauma sensitivity or trauma aware? Can anybody give me like their definition of what they believe it to be? Don't read that. Okay, yes.
Yeah, I think, how I've adapted it, over the years. Think of it like clinically, like anything could be a trauma symptom, but I think of it diagnostically. Even with diagnoses like oppositional defiant disorder or ADHD, I think working with kids I ask about trauma. I ask if anything really big or scary has happened in your life. And that's kind of how
Yeah,
I've adapted the definition.
yes, definitely. Well,
I'm also a mobile crisis clinician, actually. That's my second job. Guess you gotta hustle nowadays. But something that I do when I go and assess a kiddo, because I work with kids, is to be aware that the questions that I ask, that it's okay if they don't want to answer them. Because you gotta be aware that even though it's cool that you need to have like a very trauma informed practice, you also need to be aware of how the person can come with this question. So I always like when I see my kiddos like crying, like I come and I actually ask them, it's like, listen, if you don't want to talk about it, it's okay. Nothing is gonna happen. Like, so I think like, looking at it from the mobile crisis perspective, definitely being aware about the questions that we ask. And being 100% sure that they can be triggering for certain individuals.
yeah, well, definitely one of like, So, okay, I was just gonna say, definitely, this whole part can be a whole nother. But definitely one of the principles of being trauma informed or providing trauma informed care is empowerment. Because a lot of times when people come, are have a traumatic event happen, whatever it is, even like I was recently just in a car accident, I felt powerless. So, a lot of survivors of trauma feel like their power was taken from them. So being able to give that choice back and that power back to the survivor really, is honoring their lived experience.
I just wanted to add that a really important part of trauma sensitivity or the trauma lens in care is that trauma is determined by the person who experienced it, not by the outsider. And so I may go through something that you might not personally feel as traumatic, but that's irrelevant. So it's my experience as the person who experienced it that determines that it is traumatic. And so when we're clinically evaluating people, it's important that we never say, well, it was only this, but you this, because that can actually further inflict trauma because then they're questioning themselves and their own feelings and response. So that's kind of what I think about with that lens.
You all said it right. It's really just, understanding and being aware that like most people in this world, if not all, have dealt with a traumatic experience. And the way that people respond is possibly through a trauma response. And to be able to maybe help with like coping skills, or like if you're in a classroom, having like little meditation corner, or you may have a student that doesn't like a lot of noise, like how can we make it a little bit more quieter? Maybe they need headphones in the hallway, like just understanding, because a lot of times, when you think about how people react, I always use the thought around, Black people running away from the police. That's a trauma response to generations of being chased by police and authorities. So not understanding that, people may think it's because they're criminals, but that's not the case. So having the awareness of that. And we're going to go through some considerations for trauma sensitivity. So a lot of queer youth go through discrimination and stigma. This still, we've come a long way, but not far enough. So being queer is still stigmatized. And they deal with discrimination through their own parents, their own families, and their peers too. So we think about, we always put adults in the situation of like, having to learn to be more aware, but they deal with stuff through their peers too. And then microaggressions. So When I thought about this, I think about this a lot when I'm in meetings and I say, okay, well, we're all going to introduce ourselves and say our pronouns. I've had many times people say, I don't do that stuff. I don't use pronouns. That's not necessarily true. We all, like Silas said, how we talk about people when they're not in the room is how people want to be represented. Another type of microaggression that people in the queer community deal with is, well, you really don't look gay. You don't look like that. So as if there's a look for that. So just, being mindful of all of these different things that queer youth are dealing with. And, you may have a situation where someone comes to you and says someone's not respecting my pronouns, or then you can understand that this is a microaggression. And also when you think about how there's a saying where we heal in micro interactions, we also can cause trauma in micro moments too. So. And then intersectionality. Does anybody know about intersectionality? It was a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1980.
Sounds right.
Basically, it explains that people hold multiple identities of oppression and privilege. So when we're just talking about queer youth, but then you think about queer Black youth, queer Black women, really understanding the heaviness that intersecting oppressive identities are dealing with. So these are just really considerations. You can't put somebody in a box just because they're queer. So, and then, sorry if this is a little alarming. I was thinking about, I would display a little him on my picture. But there are so many forms of violence that is being acted on queer youth, especially transgender youth. And that people may not even be talking about, and that you may not even know that this is happening. And so it's just another thing to think about, really. When you're dealing with somebody that may flinch or something, or it's just acting in a way that you may want to label as, I know it's a lot of you work in schools, so I used to work at Windsor Public Schools too as a special ed paraprofessional. And I've witnessed teachers, talk bad about their students and their behavior. And they don't know what's happening after school, in the bathroom, at home, online. So, and then rejection and alienation. This is just something that I feel of course, a lot of people go through, but being alienated by your own family, just because you love somebody of the same sex, or you're trans, is very detrimental. And I think people need at least one place that they can go to know that they're accepted. But I feel like I'm about to get on my soapbox, but we really need to work together to create, these affirming spaces, these trauma sensitive spaces, these compassionate spaces. If we all really practice mindfulness and really, implemented empathy in everything that we do, we really could change the world. And resilience and empowerment. So we talked a lot about how empowerment is like one of the best things that you can offer people that survive trauma. And what that does is build resiliency. And maybe this is like, you all are probably have way more knowledge around coping skills and different things that can help build resiliency. Shameless plug, mindfulness and yoga is a wonderful way to help build that. And maybe gather a bunch of resources nearby. Always have something that you can offer a student, even a coworker that might come into your room and be like, hey, listen, I'm having a really hard time right now. This happened, the lunch lady, because lunch ladies are usually kind of the lunch lady says something to me and I'm just, having a lot of resources to be able to help, calm their nervous system and build that resiliency. And if you want to talk to me after this, then I can help you with some resources around that. But empowerment is good. All right. So exploring biases, we all have biases. I heard Regina talk about how she's biased towards, different things. So it's not always about, I'm biased towards someone that has a different identity than me. So a lot of when I bring this up, people start saying, well, I don't have biases, but we all do. So the why that is important is because we are going to be presented with different things in our lives that we don't realize we have a bias for. And all of a sudden, now you have to navigate how to deal with this situation without hurting somebody's feelings, or you may cause harm unintentionally. I'm sure you all know, but biases refer to preconceived and often unfair attitudes, beliefs, or prejudices that individuals may hold based on characteristics such as gender, race, orientation, or other factors, consciously or unconsciously, known as implicit bias. Has anybody taken the Harvard implicit bias test?
All my students.
These biases can influence how individuals perceive and respond to victimization of LGBTQ plus youth. Our own biases can be a barrier to youth feeling safe to ask for the help that they need. So we have, do we have a little bit more time? So here is some questions to reflect upon. And I think I'm just gonna do the last question because we're a little bit at the end here. The last question is, what supportive, affirming messages can you give the LGBTQIA plus youth in your care who may experience bias or discrimination?
Okay, so we have,
Someone is leaving.
Oh, that's okay, probably. Yeah, and if anyone does need to head out, so I know they're at time, feel free. But we're, happy to keep going or hang out afterwards.
You can take a screenshot of this if you want to, if you're a journaler, I like to journal. To be able to, okay, yes.
So just a couple simple things to give affirming messages, because I never want to call anyone out I'm never going to ask anyone to identify their gender or orientation or anything. But to let people know that whatever space we're in, where I'm the facilitator, they will receive support. I'll do things like I use a pride themed PowerPoint So I usually start the year off with that. Every June when I teach during the summer, I use that PowerPoint slide. I always lose them, but I used to have a pride button that I would keep on my backpack just so wherever I'm moving about, it would be visible. But those are just little things that I do to send a message that I care.
I mean, thank you. Those are big things because could you imagine somebody having on a pen? Every time I go to Starbucks, they always got pens on their things. But and I haven't been to Starbucks in probably also it's just like so it is affirming. It's like yes, okay, cool. And imagine if it's a youth, they're like automatically like that's my person. I'm able to, you know what I'm saying? So that even though it's a small thing, it's a big thing. And I want to also maybe end with this. One of my favorite like affirmations is however you show up in this space is completely celebrated. So I guess with that, we're gonna end. Unless you have any questions.
You just repeat that affirmation, please.
However you show up is completely celebrated in this space.
Love that. Even folks online, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and you feel free to ask them. Or if you want to put them in the chat, just put them in there. I will read them aloud.
Awesome. And before, well, anyone types or anything before we leave, just want to pass it to Dre super quick to chat about our training that we had mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, so if anybody's interested in learning more about or interested in working with sexual assault survivors, we do have as we said, we have a 24-hour hotline. And we actually take volunteers as long as you're over the age of 18. You can work on our hotline. We do a counselor advocate training. It's 48 hours. We're in the middle. We're about to end one right now, so we should have one coming up around the summertime or the end of the semester. If anybody's interested, we'll learn about LGBTQ survivors, learn about bilingual survivors, older adult, youth, everything under the sun, and talk about how we can specifically support them on our hotline. So if anybody's interested in that, I did my internship here, so if anybody wants a field placement or anything like that, reach out to us, or if anybody's just looking to get involved or in a volunteer experience. These some of my business cards are in the front, so please feel free to reach out.
Dre, is there a fee for the training?
It is $85, but if it's through the school, usually it's waived. And we do offer a scholarship too, so the fee is literally not our biggest concern at all. So if there's any way that the fee would take away from you wanting to take the class, we will not care if you can't pay it.
All right, round of applause. Thank you, Silas, Dre, and Nikki, so much for being here. I have to just share with you all something that we discussed during the break many years ago, probably 8, 9 years ago. Gloria, Amy Paleska, and we were all social workers for Bloomfield Public Schools, and we created a workshop titled Building Emotional Resilience in Children.
Yes.
Sounds right.
Yes.
Building emotional resilience. And one of the things that we shared with our colleagues is that the number one indicator of a child's ability to tap into their innate resilience, because we are all born with resilience, we don't have to develop it, it's within us, is their perceived connectedness to just one caring adult. So when you mentioned earlier that we can reduce suicidal ideation in LGBTQ or queer youth by 40% by just having one accepting adult in their lives, that really spoke to me. And I think you gave us a lot of gems today on how we can create supportive spaces and be that accepting adult for the youth in our lives. So thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you everyone online for being here.
Hello, Regina. Can Regina hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Regina.
Is that my Taji?
It sure is.
Hi, Regina, it's Amy.
I miss you all. This is Taj in my former office.
Oh, yes, your former office.
The former closet. My
This
former-
closet, yes.
Thank you for being here. I miss you all.
Miss you too. I mean, you just could talk about Bloomfield, and Amy and Amy
you know
and
what?
Amy
Zip
and
it.
Gloria
Zip it,
and
Taj.
Amy and Gloria. You got Karan sitting right there.
Taj, you know why, Taj? Because you came on the scene as a school social worker when I was leaving.
Yeah, I remember.
Regina, you don't have to explain.
Taj
Taj,
goes
she's
way
Taj.
back.
What'd you say?
Taj,
Sugarfoot? I saw her in the hallway.
Taj, you didn't come to UConn, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was a CCSU Springfield. Woo, 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 woo.
Yeah, so I actually met Taj at Springfield College because I used to speak there every year.
Oh yes, you came to class with Dr. What's that man name?
Dr. Hill.
Yeah, that one. Him.
And that's where we met. But Taj grew up in Bloomfield and was like the face of the rec, the social services
Oh,
youth
Lord.
department. So Taj knows everyone in town, Taj families. Taj's cousin is the mayor of
All right, I gotta go. Bye, y'all.
Hi, Regina.
And Taj is the first person to come visit me here when I left
Oh
Bloomfield.
yeah, I did come to see you.
You did.
Okay, I think Amy wants to talk to you now. She has something to say.
Amy left.
Never mind. Okay, well, I'm gonna go to lunch duty. Love you. Bye.
Bye. Love you too. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Nice.
Oops. Okay.